Namaste and welcome to this episode of Amazing Vedas with Dr. Parikshit Singh. Dr. Singh, thank you for joining us. And today, we want to take up this topic of how to approach the Vedas, interpret the Vedas, and how to, as it were, be reacquainted with these original scriptures of humankind, not just of the Hindus. And we've been talking about it. Last time also we talked about it in an earlier episode, and how this disassociation of sensibility occurs when we separate the Karmakanda from the Jnanakanda, and with Shankara leading us to Prasthanatrayi, Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita, and of course the Brahma Sutras, and the Vedas being confined to rituals and memorization and so forth. We'll come back to that, but let's just go to this Twitter exchange a little bit. So on the one hand, viewers, we have the Western interpreters, including Jameson and Brereton. They see nothing uplifting, sacred, holy in the Vedas. Then you have other people on the Indian side who say, look, leave Vedas to the, to the specialists. It's only Karmakanda. Don't dabble with them. Go only to the Upanishads. So I want to say that, please, Vedas is not low-hanging fruit, okay? Yeah, but it's not the forbidden fruit either. So, Dr. Singh, please help us out here in this conundrum.
So if you even, let's take a look. There are multiple, this is a very layered concept, but even if you take a cursory look at the Veda, it has profound insights. In fact, the first announcement, the articulation of there being one reality or one truth comes from the Veda. And it's very famous, as you know, Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vadanti. It's a, now this is not ritual. We all understand. This is a very, very enlightened statement. And then, of course, in the fifth mandala, the 62nd suktam, the first rik, it says, Ritena ritam apihitam dhruvam mam. So the truth has covered itself by its own order. The truth has covered itself. Very powerful insight of what comes out later in Vedanta and Shankara even. But it's surprising to me that Shankara doesn't talk about that. If you look at the Gayatri Mantra, which is a very powerful mantra, and I would say Gayatri Mantra had an influence on the Bhagavad Gita, and someday we can talk about it. But to become an instrument of the highest light, so that the light itself does our thinking, impels our thought, that is a very powerful realization. So Gayatri Mantra itself is a very powerful statement, which is not ritual. Or the Mahamrityunjay Mantra, and these are staple for us. We grew up with that. Mahamrityunjay Mantra has the power to release you from death. Not physical death, perhaps that too, but from the fear of death. And it's a very beautiful invocation of Rudra. Rudra, who's feared, who will make you cry, who will scream, and yet in that intensity, behind that intensity, is total fearlessness. And that is what we learn from him. You look at all the creation hymns of the 10th mandala, how beautiful, how gorgeous. You look at the Devi Suktam, which is my favorite, 10.125, but I'm, of course, biased. But absolute gorgeous articulation of this great poet. I think her name was Vaka herself. And she announces that, who she is, the divine Shakti speaks through her. This is not ritual. Nasadiya Suktam is not ritual. Hiranya Garbha, Purusha Sukta, these are not ritual. So where did we mess up? Even the Agni Suktam, when we really look at it, or the Indra Suktam, or the Surya Suktam, these are not only gorgeous literature and beautiful poetry, these are linguistics, these are healing sounds that are created. But then every one of them can be understood as a document of a spiritual realization, as our tradition has been. And since the Veda itself, the Veda was considered spiritual, and the Veda talks about itself. It's almost like a metafiction talking about itself while it's creating itself. And the Upanishads talk about it, and the Sri Krishna himself talks about the Veda, and what is the pitfall to be avoided. The pitfall to be avoided is what we have adopted today, to see the Veda as not Traigunya Vishaya Vedaha Nistraigunyo Bhavarjuna. To avoid that aspect, come to the 4.24, and where we realize that Brahmarpanam Brahma Havihi, Brahmagno Brahmanahutam, that the divine Brahman is everything. The Brahman is the offering, Brahman is the fire, Brahman is the very realization. The person who's giving it is the Brahman, and the fire that is receiving, and what you are putting in it is also Brahman. And then we come down the tradition of Madhvacharya, we come down further to Swami Dayananda, and in between that, we had several great tikakars who wrote about the adhyatmic aspect of the Veda. And then, of course, Sri Aurobindo, who beautifully showed using the root sounds, the seed sounds, using his own spiritual realization primarily, and the teaching, whatever the instructions he got from Sri Krishna, to show that the Veda is a profound spiritual document. And the only way we can see it as a Karmakanda is it teaches us how to do karma properly, like the Gita. But we don't call the Gita Karmakanda. So when we say Karmakanda, we just kind of seclude it from the world of knowledge. But the knowledge in the Veda is so deep, so profound. It's relentless. Every time I read the Agni Suktam, something new comes out into the head, something new I learn from it. The first Anuvaka, and I've been tweeting about it. Now, my goal was to move to the 30th Suktam by now, and I'm still stuck at the third, because every time I start moving and I do the reading, I find something else new, something beautiful, joyous, that has set the standard for thousands of years of humanity. So the knowledge in the Veda is spiritual. We should realize it. Our teachers have shown us. And if all we need is an open mind, the ability to listen, the ability to touch subtly, and we'll realize that the Veda is as spiritual or more spiritual than any other creation that we have had in at least the Indic tradition and the world tradition.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm glad you mentioned Devi Suktam. I think the poet is a female, Vagambarani.
Ambrini, yes, yeah.
Now, the reason I'm bringing up these things is that there has been traditionally a prohibition. You see, women were not supposed to learn the Veda or even hear it. In families like mine also, we had some of these prohibitions a few generations ago. And certainly the so-called Shudras and the Atishudras were not supposed to study the Vedas. These are facts. These are historic facts. And what happened to that? What happened to some of it? Adhikaravad. Even before Sri Aurobindo, it was Swami Dayananda Saraswati and, also other people. Swami Vivekananda, he said Vivekananda was not a Brahmin. He was a Kayastha. He took a stand against Adhikaravad. Dayananda Saraswati said, going back to the Gita, it is not Janmana, it is Karmana. So, and this is something, in fact, even Dr. Ambedkar does not acknowledge how Swami Dayananda Saraswati made so-called people born in the Brahmin community sweep floors, because he said this fellow is only fit for that. And he took somebody who was considered a Shudra or Ati Shudra, taught him the Vedas, made him do the rituals. So please, what I'm trying to say is that we definitely don't take the traditionalist, ultra-traditionalist position that the Vedas are not for everyone, or they're only for Brahmins, or they're not for women, or Shudras, or whatever such terms are. Certainly, we do not take that stand. On top of that, we do not take the stance that the Vedas are so esoteric that you need 12 years of training in Sanskrit to understand them. Then we also don't take the modern Western approach that these are hymns or compositions of very primitive people who are basically nature worshippers. So, whenever they saw something, a force of nature like the sun, the moon. They saw seasons and stars and winds and rivers, and they started worshipping them. Also, that these people were very, greedy, power oriented. They wanted sons, so they composed a hymn. They wanted cows, they composed another hymn. They wanted to defeat their enemies, they composed another hymn. So this is a very reductive approach. And the narrative part of the Veda, I think that is so important, which our traditionalists have ignored, and which Sri Aurobindo really brought to light, because he talked about these cycles of narrative, cycles of legends, cycles of stories. So the Veda is not only the source of spiritual wisdom, it's also the source of stories, because all stories are based on conflict, deep conflict, okay, between protagonists and antagonists. And it's only the Veda who actually teaches you what the real antagonists were like, okay? Because even Shakespeare is, as it were, clutching at his hair or his beard. He was supposed to be bearded to try to figure out what evil is. And he comes up with Iago, a person who has no motive but who spoils the life of others. But anyhow, so we are not taking that position on the Vedas either, that it's the composition of primitive people who only wanted success. Even Brereton and Jameson say that, these people wanted success. And so, they had these incantations. But, we have as many approaches to the Veda as there are people. And today with AI, we want to open it up. Neither of us is a Sanskrit Pandit. I failed to learn Sanskrit, let me tell you honestly. And Dr. Singh has taught himself better than many people I know. So we are all learners on the way, but I still feel, though I failed to learn Sanskrit, both the traditional and the modern way, I think I can understand it with a little bit of help. So I'm not anxious now to do what I couldn't do as a child, to memorize, though it's very beautiful to memorize. But I'm interested in understanding what's going on, right? And being transformed. And I think Sri Aurobindo shows us the way. So all this is not only for Gen Z, but for all viewers, that the Vedas are an invitation, and it's species wisdom. It's already inside you. So on Twitter, when people are saying, get the Pandits, we don't need the authority of Pandits. Please, we welcome them, but we don't need their stamp of approval, okay? We don't need to be legitimated by any school of Panditry. At the same time, those who want to do Karmakanda, they're welcome to. We still do it. We do Shraddh, we do Upanayanam, we do these ceremonies. We have all the, 64 or now 16 or even more abbreviated samskaras. We do them. And we do get, hopefully, good Pandits. Sometimes we are disappointed because they don't pronounce it properly. I found some good ones, by the way. And I'm very happy to tip them generously and give them all the respect, to give them Gurdakshina on a beetle leaf when they really recite it well. And otherwise, we still support them, because if not, who's going to support them? They're not government servants, right? So, Karmakanda is fine, rituals are fine, but this division between the ritual and the Gyan Marg is, you remember, Dr. Singh, we were in this panel discussion, which was at the Sanskrit University, and Dr. Narayana Swami said, too much of these Upanishads now, enough of Vedanta, let's go to the Vedas. And then the Vice Chancellor started shivering in his chair, saying, you can't say that, people will, shut us down and so forth. So, look, we are not afraid in that sense of opening up the Vedas to all sincere and serious seekers. So, viewers, send in your questions and comments, and check us out on X also, and spread the word. We want to open up the Vedas. We don't want to close them. The Vedas are not a closed book. Also, they're not a book out there. The Vedas are living knowledge, and it's also inside you. It's in your cellular memory, right? Because it's knowledge of who we are. And I think, Dr. Singh, you said it very well. The avarana, the way, truth covers itself, and that is the metaphor that was used in the fivefold, functions or fivefold capacities of Shiva himself, right? The self-veiling of Shiva. and the anugraha, the self-unveiling, So creation, right? Shrishti, maintenance, sthiti, right? And you can see the symbols in any Nataraja, all the 5 potencies of Shiva. So Shrishti, Sthiti, Samhar, Tirodhana, and Anugraha. Now, all of these are in the Veda, which is why David Frawley of Vamadeva Shastri says that the real god of the Vedas is Shiva, he says. Though you don't find Shiva, you find Rudra, as you see. Shiva is more a metaphor, used as auspiciousness, right? But please, so all we're trying to say is that most of the foundational ideas, paradigms, and values of our civilization are already in the Veda. And we just talked about Sarama in our last episode. Please check that out. And we are going to now talk about the other forces, the forces of darkness, evil, if you will. But we will continue this discussion on how to interpret the Vedas, how to approach them with that spirit of reverence, but openness and critical, intelligence, and not just, some sort of fundamentalist approach that closes their multiple meanings. So, with these words, thank you and see you soon. And do like, share, and subscribe to our channel, The Amazing Veda.